recognise Chris from his earlier appearance today, around about 10 o'clock, Property Quorum, when he and a couple of others, actually 3 other esteemed property-related peeps were discussing some of the issues of the day. And when I asked him what he'd like to talk about today, he mentioned that the disappearing landlord. What's going on, Chris?
Yeah, well, as expected, the new Labour have come in and started having a clear out of the old policies and kind of reinvigorating new policies, dragging up all sorts of dead ones, policies that we thought had died a long time ago, and it's causing concern, shall we say, in the private rented sector. Their policies seem to be the most anti-landlord you could possibly have imagined for any government coming in recent times. So yeah, they seem to have, for whatever reason, landlords in their crosshairs.
Can you give me examples of policies that have been revamped or reinvigorated, or that are anti-landlord specifically?
There's a couple. So there's the EPC ratings that they're going to try and increase to a C. So you'd have to have a C on your certificate or above to be able to rent your property.
Okay.
Most of the housing stock in this country is below that level, so that's going to be a challenge.
How much below that level are we talking?
Majority, the vast majority. Hard to pin me down on a number. I don't know.
No. What I'm saying is that we're talking sizable numbers, yes?
Huge amount of the 20 million residential units in the UK. Yeah.
Okay, so a good proportion of that. Yeah. And to bring them up to C rating, give me a vague idea what's involved, so that people can appreciate.
The hilarious thing with it as well is they recently rejigged all the bandings. So they do this from time to time. So what used to happen, what used to be get you up a level, it doesn't necessarily equate to what could now get you up a level. Also, I'm familiar with people using electric boilers, but because it's not gas, they're way down in the EPC rating, so you get down rated for using an electric boiler. As one example.
Why?
Because the way they've got it rigged at the moment. That's the way it's set up.
Even if you had, for instance, personal solar, and you had an electric boiler, you'd still be down. It's because it's an electric boiler.
That's right.
Absurd.
Yes.
All right.
That's right. And obviously, they're trying to push the net zero targets, which no one really asked for. It's people may not even agree with. There's obviously an argument around reducing carbon. And
I believe that's a good direction of travel. I just don't think it's practical to put the expensive onus, upon many people who probably can't afford to suddenly move towards heat pumps or the like.
Yeah, it's the on cost of doing so. So, I mean, landlords with a few properties scaling up to landlords with volumes of stock will be like, well, it's going to come down to me to significantly improve the structure of these properties, unless there's some sort of a subsidy that's available, since it's you that's telling me to do this. And lots of landlords will be like, no thanks, I'm out, I'm done, walking away. And that is exactly what we're seeing. And I think I can't remember which article I sent you earlier. But yeah, landlords just exiting the market, and will continue to exit the market if they are treated poorly.
And there's no reduction in the number of people looking for somewhere to put their weary head at night.
No, it's increasing. It's increasing because of measures like this. So that is the knock-on effect. If you remove volume of stock out of the private rented sector, you're effectively reducing competition. You're reducing the amount of supply. You're reducing the options that are available for prospective tenants. At the same time as increasing the costs, because obviously it's all markets are genuinely driven by supply and demand, and rightly so when they're not interfered with. And if they weren't interfered with, they would find their equilibrium. But at the moment, because you've got the government meddling in things that it doesn't necessarily understand, or if you're more skeptical, does understand and is doing so intentionally, then yeah, it's increasing costs for everybody and worsening the situation for everybody. So it's not a really good situation for anyone.
Can I ask you to speculate? I know it's a dangerous thing to do, but speculate why the government might want to put the pressure on the private rented market. What would be the benefit?
Which rabbit hole would you like to go down on this one?
You pick. Your monkey, your circus.
From a very vanilla perspective, let's look at if it was doing it intentionally. It would be following in the footsteps of the Osborne era government and things that he was doing as Chancellor, in that they're probably trying to increase regulation in that market, increase their level of control over that market, remove smaller independents from the market, which they've got less control over or less sway over, move people away from, obviously, landlords for a long time, they've held stock in their own names. That changed with clause or section 24 coming in 2015 by Osborne, with the changes to the tax regime and the not being able to offset the cost of interests on your lending against your revenue. So yeah, there has been a push towards moving away from landlords holding stock in their private names, where it's, I guess, less traceable, less taxable potentially,
right?
Easier to hide, and pushing more for the use of corporate or government-backed entities, legal structures that companies and the like, that they're registered with Companies House and they can be tracked, and anything that's registered is effectively got some level of state control over it. So that seems to be where they've been pushing over the last decade or so.
I mean, not all of it seems to be nefarious. Some of it seems to be honestly intentioned. So a small amount of extra regulation might not be a bad thing. But where they get to the point where they're defining everything and restricting everything, there has to be the middle way, I would have thought.
The challenge with ever increasing regulation is that they don't have the foresight to remove the dead wood from the regulation base.
Right.
That you end up with a situation where everything becomes illegal based on your legal structures, that you have so much regulation you can't go one way or the other without both being illegal. So and
then with those things, typically, because I've seen this in other societies, you end up with everything being regulated. Everything. I saw this actually in so-called socialist democratic countries. Side note: if you ever see the word democratic in the title of a country, that means it's anti-democratic usually by default. But what I used to see was because within those kind of organizations and control structures, everything is prescribed, everything is controlled. So what happens is you develop a grey market or a grey side to it, where everybody's ignoring those completely and going around the back of it. It encourages that approach. Lack of flexibility.
It's almost like the end step of countries is where they really start breaking down. You can see that pattern across history. But yeah,
they move away from a benign whatever it is. I mean, I don't call us a democracy. I say we're a benign oligarchy, or more benign oligarchy, because we have the illusion that we have control, but because of the first past the post system, it's loosely speaking only between two major modifiers, with a couple other people squawking in the sidelines. It's not quite as bad as the States, who are only just red. Are you red or are you blue? It's not quite as bad as that, but we're certainly in that central generalization. And then if you look in as I said, socialist countries where everything is prescribed, you end up with the underclass where everything is completely broken down with the facade of structure over the top of it.
Yeah, that's right. Everything becomes stale and stops working. And yeah, like you say, in certain places, people just ignore it and get on with their day. And because, and I guess it's not people are not less persecuted because the authorities who would be doing the persecuting know what the pushback would be, so they kind of turn the blind eye to it. Yeah. But yeah, we're sticklers for following the rules in this country, so it doesn't bode well for the nation.
Well, at the moment we're going through a body of change, the rise of the re-rise of fascism, groups of communities being scared. Incidentally, some of those groups are the ones holding a lot of the money that's waiting to be reinvested in the economy. So I think they are playing against themselves. But I'm hoping that that's just a current wave. I certainly believe that landlords are an absolute critical part of the nation's infrastructure. Certainly decent rented accommodation that is not umpteen times overpriced. That is an important part of the infrastructure. And I can see from a Labour government's perspective that they want to almost provide the facility for everyone, hence, but if you provide the facility for everyone and you end up providing facility for no one, that's what I think is possible, the logical conclusion. You mentioned there was one other thing that was irritating you.
Did I?
Yes. I asked you for examples of where it was falling down at the moment. You gave me the first one, which is this. But
what was the other one?
The rabbit hole. There were two rabbit holes. One of which was that they're trying to exert more pressure, create more structure, and create more control. And that was the most vanilla, as you described it, of it.
Yeah, they're trying to do it for.
But let's take a less vanilla attitude, Chris.
They're trying to implode it. They're just trying to cause chaos. So that's another one. So they'll divide and rule.
But I would have seen that of the previous government. I don't want to believe it of this one. This one is supposed to be by the people for the people. That's a very tenet of the Labour Party, is it not?
I judge them on their actions so far.
Right.
How far in are they say at the moment? 100 days?
No, we're not.
Not even that?
No. We're like 30 or 40 days in. Barely a month.
It's a bit of a bloodbath so far.
It's been interesting, that's for sure. They started off well. They did some very good things, and now it seems to have gone off course completely. Mm-hmm. Or maybe a cynic might say completely on course. All right. So, current landlords, what should they be doing to try and
absolute best thing they can do is minimize as much regulation as possible. I appreciate in some instances regulation is a necessary evil. Absolutely stay out of the free markets. The markets will regulate themselves naturally through the balance of supply and demand. All they got to do is step away from it, stop meddling, stop trying to strangle the landlords. If there's some additional regulation regarding people's safety, for example, or there's so much that's already in our legal framework that why keep adding to it? It's not necessary. The framework is fit for purpose.
The one thing that both worries me and doesn't worry me, I'm not a landlord, but I used to be in rented property 10, 15 years ago. No fault evictions.
Yep.
We don't have that at the moment, do we?
We don't have we still have no fault evictions. Yeah, so Section 21. So a landlord can ask you to vacate the property.
But apparently there's a move afoot to remove that facility, yes?
It's been on for quite some time, yes. However, there needs to be a framework in place to provide the landlord with reasonable grounds to get their property back. I'm totally behind the idea of supporting the removal of no-fault evictions. However, there are instances in which the landlord should be able to request that their property is returned to them.
Right.
But yeah, it still remains to be seen what that framework is going to look like. And the previous government welched on it because they said, well, if we did change all this, then the law courts couldn't deal with it. But they didn't do anything to bolster the law courts.
Which I think we would all agree is bullshit.
Yeah, it's just an easy kick that can down the road. Bye.
That was a cop out. All right.
Yeah.
But I was under the impression the list lot were more up for it.
Well, we'll see. If they stick to their guns and actually deliver on opening up the planning system, on delivering houses, to be honest with you, I think they should invest in using the taxpayers' money to build houses again, or devolving funds to the local authorities so the local authorities can own homes. I think it was the biggest mistake that has ever happened for all the council houses to be sold off on the cheap. I think almost all of those have now ultimately got really sold to private investors. Lots of which may be outside of the country, so you've completely lost control of those assets. So that, I do think that was quite a big mistake. So I think Labour, New Labour, or whichever Labour they are this week, could turn that around, but it remains to be seen if they do anything. So I'm watching. We'll see.
All right. So summarise, if you would, please, just before we round this up for today.
Yeah, if they keep bringing in new regulation without chopping some of the old stuff, having a sight on what really is necessary, we're going to see more landlords exiting the market, and yeah, you'll see people like me helping those and funneling those back into the social housing sector and the PRS. But yeah, it's a really
You can't do it for everyone, though, can you?
I can't.
There's only so much of you, and even though I know you're on an expansionist route, you ain't going to expand that fast. There's still, but I mean, in all sincerity, we need the availability of places to rent. Not everybody can afford or is in a position to get a mortgage and a property. Right. So therefore, we need to be able to provide, although renting seems to become more onerous than it used to be.
The greater the squeeze on the PRS, the greater the squeeze on renters and the costs involved. Yeah, it's just a lose-lose for everyone.
Surely there must be some light at the end of the tunnel, Chris.
We'll wait and see. We'll find out.
On that bombshell, I'd like to say thank you very much, Chris, for another great session. Guys, we do this every week. I wouldn't say we necessarily solve anything, but you hear a lot of opinion here. And we encourage you to take part and feedback. I occasionally have people say to me, that thing you talked about with Chris last week, I completely disagree. That's great. But it would be even better if you could do it while we're actually talking. That would be great. I know there's a lot of fear of people putting comments on the internet at the moment. I understand. But it helps us change our direction or improve it so it becomes more useful to all of you. Please remember that we also have another show, which Chris is part of, which is 10 o'clock on Thursdays, which is Property Quorum. And on Friday, I'm with Hamish McClay, Property Matters at 3 o'clock. But until the next time I see you, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and look after yourself and each other. Bye-bye now.